Somewhere between Java and Sumatra, a ship captain stares at a chart and makes a decision that shapes the price of everything you buy. He can take the fast road, the Strait of Malacca, 50 miles wide at its narrowest, 94,000 ships a year, the most trafficked waterway on Earth. Or he can take the shortcut that isn't really a shortcut, the Sunda Strait, 40 miles wide at best, and at its northeastern end, just 20 meters deep. Deep enough for a ferry, not deep enough for his ship. That limitation is the whole story. The Sunda Strait runs roughly 45 miles between the southwestern tip of Java and the southeastern tip of Sumatra. It connects the Indian Ocean to the Java Sea, and through the Java Sea to the South China Sea, and through that to China, Japan, South Korea, the manufacturing core of the planet. On paper, it looks like a reasonable alternative to Malacca. On paper. The problem is what's underneath the water and what's sitting in the middle of it. The northeastern end of the strait shoals to 20 meters, 66 feet, which sounds like plenty until you're handling a fully laden supertanker with a draft of 22 meters. You don't thread a VLCC through Sunda. You don't thread an ultra-large container vessel through it either. The ships that carry the world's bulk cargo, the ones moving oil, iron, ore, grain, coal, were simply not designed for this water. They're too tall from keel to waterline. So they go elsewhere. They go east to the Lombok Strait, carried 200 miles longer, or they squeeze through Malacca, where there's just barely enough room if you time the tides. And sitting in the middle of the Sunda Strait, in case the depth weren't enough of a complication, is Anak Krakatau, child of Krakatau, the volcano that rebuilt itself from the caldera of the 1883 eruption that killed 36,000 people and temporarily dropped global temperatures. In December 2018, Anak Krakatau's flank collapsed into the sea without warning. The resulting tsunami killed 430 people on the coastlines of Java and Sumatra in under 35 minutes. Ships transiting the strait maintain a 5-kilometer exclusion zone around the cone. The volcano is still active today. So what does actually move through the Sunda Strait? Approximately 280 vessels per year, carrying around 100 million tons of cargo annually, according to maritime transit surveys. These are mostly smaller vessels, regional tankers, bulk carriers under 100,000 deadweight tons, ferry traffic between Java and Sumatra fishing fleets. For context, the Strait of Malacca moved 94,000 vessels in 2024 alone. Sunda handles about 2.4% of that traffic, but here's why Sunda still matters, despite every one of those limitations. The Strait of Malacca is approaching capacity. Analysts project that by 2030, traffic through Malacca will exceed the strait's safe handling threshold. The combined Sunda and Lombok corridors together handle roughly 15,000 transits annually, about 16% of Malacca's volume. And when anything goes wrong in Malacca, a grounding, a military standoff, a pandemic choke point, every ship needs somewhere to go. Sunda is one of only 2 realistic overflow valves for the most critical trade corridor in Asia. The strategic math is stark. Approximately 75 to 80% of China's crude oil imports transit the Strait of Malacca, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. That's the number that explains China's Malacca Dilemma, the fear that a naval adversary could blockade that single strait and starve China's economy of energy. The entire logic of China's string of pearls port strategy, its naval expansion, its belt and road investments from Pakistan to Sri Lanka, traces back to that vulnerability. Rerouting through Sunda or Lombok adds between 1,500 nautical miles and up to 15 additional days of transit time. One routing analysis found that using Sunda instead of Malacca costs nearly $206,000 more per voyage, a 7.3% premium on a baseline voyage cost of $2.82 million. Multiply that across hundreds of voyages and you understand why captains keep choosing Malacca even as it gets more congested. The geopolitics accelerated sharply in April 2026 when the United States and Indonesia signed a major defense cooperation partnership. The pact covers capacity building, training, and operational cooperation, including subsurface capabilities and autonomous maritime platforms. Analysts in Beijing and Singapore immediately understood the subtext. Indonesia controls the shores of Malacca, Sunda, Lombok, and the Makassar Strait simultaneously. A U.S.-aligned Indonesia with American maritime domain awareness systems positioned across those straits means that China's energy lifeline runs through waters where American sensors now have eyes. The SCMP described it plainly: the pact sharpens China's Malacca Dilemma. Indonesia has spent decades resisting alliance entanglement, practicing what Jakarta calls free and active foreign policy. The April 2026 pact represents a significant departure, and it covers the Sunda Strait just as clearly as it covers Malacca. Now imagine the strait actually fails. Not from war, from geology. Anak Krakatau erupts with force, a flank collapse larger than 2018. Ash closes airspace over Java and Sumatra. Triggered, the tsunami warning system triggers evacuation on both coasts. Sunda shuts completely, not because anyone ordered it shut, but because no insurer on Earth will cover a ship transiting through an active volcanic event zone. Traffic that normally diverts to Sunda in a Malacca emergency has nowhere to go. The 280 vessels that normally use Sunda annually must add the Lombok deviation, already 300 kilometers farther east, adding days to every voyage. Indonesian ports at Merak and Bakauheni, the ferry terminals serving the most critical land bridge in Southeast Asia, go silent. And if both Malacca and Sunda are compromised at the same time, even for 72 hours, container lines that run on just-in-time inventory schedules start calling force majeure. Electronics factories in Shenzhen and Ho Chi Minh City that depend on component shipments from the Indian Ocean basin begin calling suppliers. Fuel oil prices in Tokyo and Seoul tick up within hours. This is why a strait too shallow for supertankers still shows up in every serious geopolitical risk model. Carried not because of what it carries today, but because of what it would need to carry if everything else went wrong. The Sunda Strait is the world's emergency exit, and the door is 20 meters deep. Geography wrote these rules before any country existed to enforce them. Indonesia inherited them. The rest of the world depends on them. And Anak Krakatau, 4 kilometers above the waterline and growing, is the only entity on Earth that answers to none of them.